Being unprepared is how great fathers become weekend visitors. I'm Jude Sandval, and this is Strategic Defense, the operational briefing for fathers who refuse to be sidelined by a system that exploits drift and unpreparedness. I ensure your mistakes don't become your permanent reality. While a lawyer handles your legal rights, I serve as your guide through the decision gap to protect your actual role as a father. You are now entering the command center. Today's briefing begins now. Hello, and welcome back to this week's show and briefing. Gentlemen, today we're taking a deep, uncompromising dive into what it actually takes to hold the line for your children when the entire apparatus of the modern family law is stacked against you. Now, I know many of you dads who come into this community start with the exact same story. They tell me something like, hey, we want to keep it civil. I'm just going to stay flexible. I'm taking the high road. I'll let her cool down, something to this effect. And once she sees I'm playing fair, we'll work out everything else, the 50-50 parenting time, the decision-making, etc. And now, that can happen, dads, but lots of times, and even if you're not in that place yet of high conflict, this story is a mirage. It's the peace that you bought with, for many of you, and this was my case and my guest today's case, it's the peace you bought by being a yes man during your relationship. And that's the long and short of it. And you're mistakenly assuming that if you just keep submitting, she'll play fair in return. And so today, my guest is a man who learned that lesson the hardest possible way. His name is Ajdin Kolonic. Damn it, I tried so hard. I was working so hard on that. And he's the author of a powerful new memoir called Fighting to be Father, a memoir of love, justice, and legacy. And Ajdin's a former corporate business analyst, a tennis entrepreneur, and a mental toughness coach living in Amsterdam. 9 years ago, when his son was born outside of marriage, he walked into a legal nightmare. He was living in Amsterdam at the time, and under Dutch law, an unmarried mother held 100% sole custody by default. And he experienced within 1 week of his son's birth, his ex packing up the apartment, taking all the furniture down to the plastic cutlery and moving across the country. So Ajdin went from being an expectant, devoted father to a man who had zero legal rights, no custody, and was forced to drive 3 hours round trip just to get a single hour of supervised visitation with his newborn. And over the next 8 years, he faced 12 separate court appearances, over 75 pages of manufactured accusations from his ex's entire extended family, calling him aggressive, dangerous, a flight risk, all kinds of things. False police reports designed to frame him for abuse, manipulative videos filmed by his ex-mother-in-law, and unilateral relocations, gatekeeping, financial extortion, like almost the whole shebang, guys. Yet, despite facing a system where his lawyer told him, and you guys know my take on lawyers and what they're saying all the time, which is not necessarily true. If you didn't have the money and endless determination, you wouldn't have been a father to your son. Actually, that's a good thing. Sorry, there's another thing that his attorney says later that I don't agree with. But if you didn't have the money and endless determination, you wouldn't have been a father to your son. So Ajdin fought this way from zero rights all the way to 50-50 joint custody and equal parenting time. And he didn't do it by screaming, making threats, or getting bitter. He won by deploying what he calls practiced calm, which I love that phrase, practice calm, and we're going to talk about that. And that is treating every attack as a logistical problem, establishing forensic paper trails, mastering emotional regulation, and executing a long-term strategy built on game theory. So, dads, if you're currently sitting in this fog of high conflict, this episode is going to be a blueprint from somebody who did it absolutely on his own. Ajdin, thanks so much for being here and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for that introduction, for the opportunity to speak.
Now, that's a long introduction. It was very detailed, but I know it only scratches the surface of the experience that you've had over the time that you've been in family court. So let's start back at the beginning. And 1 week after your son was born, you came home from work to find your apartment cleared out, right? Furniture gone, kitchen empty, your newborn son gone. You found you say this and it's a graphic that stuck with me. You say you found one dirty plastic spoon in a cupboard, which you ate with, which you actually used and you ate with for weeks. So take us back to that moment and kind of what went through your mind, your nervous system when you realized that your son had been taken and you had no legal standing to do anything about it.
Yeah, I'm glad you're starting there, because after I answer this, I think the questions after that should be easier.
Yeah.
It is the toughest part by far. I mean, it's hard for me to even think about that period, to be honest, because all of it is, of course, present in my memories and in my, somewhere in my mind, but it's slowly but surely getting a lesser and lesser role.
Mm-hmm.
It was tough, I think. Because whatever I did in my life, I always had this feeling that I can manage, that I can get it to where it needs to go. And whether it was sports, relationships of any kind, or work, I always did. But at that point, the more I tried to think how to approach it, the more closed doors I encountered. Even when I started searching and Googling, or even talking to people, even talking to friends and families, I started realizing there just seems absolutely nothing I can do. It's as simple as that. It's an action that my son's mother took that I could do absolutely nothing about. And that hit me quite hard, because I was sitting there for the first time in my life, maybe even, where I was faced with a certain outcome that I just literally, forget confidence, intelligence, preparation, or whatever. I just had no answer to, and what a thing to be involved with. And I mean, I at that point I needed nothing else to just see my son. That's it, just to see him, be in his vicinity. But I could do absolutely nothing, and that hit quite hard. I mean, nowadays I'm a little bit better when completely out of control about something, to kind of leave it or let it go. But even now, if I was faced with a situation like that, when you have no agency or authority to see a loved one, it was devastating, to be honest.
Right.
So,
which would it be safe to describe you're just unprepared for a situation? Because what you describe in your book is that you did everything possible, everything you could up through the pregnancy. You were a good fiance. You were making plans. You were planning for the future. You were preparing, doing everything and anything, and then having this happen and being thrust into a situation. And this is kind of the thing that all of the dads that come to the community, that's just you're unprepared because you've never gone through this experience before, and you don't know what to expect, and like laws there and laws here, and and not to mention we're going to get into kind of the mindset around fatherhood, et cetera, and coming up here, but you just don't know. You're just unprepared.
Yeah, I think that you hit the nail on the head. I think the key word there is preparation, but not even in the sense of like preparing by doing something or by reading about something. Preparation, I think, starts with just imagining that something is possible, right? Just having the thoughts that something might happen. That already in itself would be preparation. Well, that's how unprepared I was, because that something, that she would, for example, just take him and leave and, give me some kind of a note, you can leave us alone now, I'll let you know. And then no, I mean, I never even thought that could happen. So that's like the ultimate unpreparedness.
Right. Well, and then you also talk about your first attorney meeting, which anybody that's listening that's already in this has had that first attorney meeting, and your lawyer told you. I think the quote from the book is, you're the most naive man in the world, right? And this is where, and this is the part that bothers me, that I don't agree with. He said, you're the most naive man in the world for thinking fatherhood was automatically protected, and that getting 35% time would take 4 years in a best case scenario.
Yeah, the lawyer was a she, by the way.
She, okay.
Not that it matters, but yeah, I mean, indeed I was. I mean, it's not the first time I've been naive about things. I have this knack about me to be overly positive and expect the best in people. When it works beautifully, but when it doesn't, it can, as it has in this case, turned out pretty bad. And I don't know, I was just basically, let me put it this way, I thought we were living at that point in 2016. I thought we were, in a developed Western country ruled by law. And even though the principle of equal parenting is carried in Dutch law and carried even in Dutch culture, and I think in even broader Western culture, for me, I mean, I never realized, again, talking about that preparation, I never realized that might not be the case in a broader social or cultural context. I mean, even if you ask people, about equal parenting, everybody would agree that the parents are equal, etc. But in practical, concrete sense, I remember people asking me when I would describe my situation, they would ask me about my son's mother. They would literally say, that's terrible, but is she a good mother? Right. That question stuck with me. That's how ingrained this cultural aspect is, that even when you talk to intelligent people who've never been through this and who carry this same notion that parenthood should be equal, can just dismiss all these things, these things where one parent is completely like played out of the picture, if that's the correct English term. Just go like, yeah, but is she a good mother? And I used to like stare at them blankly, thinking like, what exactly do you mean? I mean,
yeah. So the challenge, the thing I want the dads to know and understand is, you're put in a position where seeing your newborn son was treated as a privilege. That's what you're describing to me, granted by her and her family rather than a right owned by a father. And even though up until that point, you had done everything. There was nothing that would, no proof, nothing that says that you were anything other than a good person and a capable and willing dad. And then, they did stuff like demand that you apologize for speaking your native language, restricted you to 15-minute walks, monitored your every move. So, how do you handle it's in some respects humiliating, and in having the dignity that us dads have, especially dads that are there and showing up and excited and loving. You describe beautifully in your book of how you cried the first time that you held your son, and all the dads that show up in our community feel the same way. How did you handle that when that started to happen?
To be honest, I mean, looking back on it, sometimes I don't understand it myself. But as I wrote in the book, I think the best explanation for that was given by a friend of mine. I play tennis at a reasonably high level, and this friend is also a tennis player. And I remember that at a certain point, a couple of us were sitting at the table, and I was describing some details about my situation. And one friend asked, he was completely stunned. He asked me how are you even staying sane? And this other friend started laughing and said the same. And he said the same way he plays tennis. He just when you think you got him, he pisses in another backhand. And however silly or funny that may sound, it really is that. I mean, through my life somehow, maybe from my experiences when I was a kid, or when I came to the Netherlands as a refugee, or maybe literally just from tennis, really, to never give up. There is no giving up. I mean, you go and you keep fighting for what you think is right until the end. And the end is when I don't know, I would have had to have gone crazy to actually stop. But So I absolutely felt weak and I felt insecure. And I think the worst of it all was just the doubt. I think I doubted so much. I doubted whether I was up to it.
Mm.
I mean, looking back on it, I realized that part of it is not even the situation, but just being a new father. And I mean, he was my first son, and I only have him. So just, I guess, being a new father, it brings by itself some doubt. Can I handle this?
Right.
Is she probably, even this cultural aspect that we mentioned a couple of minutes ago? I mean, even I was suffering from it. The part of that doubt was that. I mean, is she better fit to be a parent than I am? I mean, all these things, but even through that doubt, I thought to myself, look, there are certain principles that are important here, and a kid doesn't need perfect parents. So even through that doubt, I said, like, even if I can't be perfect, a kid doesn't need perfect parents. He just needs parents, and that's plural. It's not singular; it's plural. He needs both parents.
Right.
And there are things that a mother cannot teach a kid like a father could, and vice versa. There are things a father cannot teach kids like a mother would, and that's why they need both. And that kind of, just this conviction about the principle kept me going. But there was a lot of insecurity and doubt, and looking back on it, I mean, I remember when I was forced to look at this video where her mother was filming him and my ex on the floor playing. He could barely even talk. And she's asking him, where did daddy hit you? Where did daddy hit you? Just looking at that, I mean, when I think about it now, I realize that would never fly, right? I mean, she was, talking to a baby pretty much who can't even talk, and she was kind of leading him into the answers. So now, where I am now, I would immediately think like, yeah, any judge would dismiss this, any professional would just see through this. But at that point, it hit me so hard. I thought that was it. When I saw that video, I thought, like, this is it. They're going to take my kid away from me. I was literally panicking. I mean, I cannot even describe how I felt, how destroyed and completely in panic I felt.
Which is really why it's important to, when you're going through this process, surround yourself with other dads that have gone through and experienced this, because and that's why we've created the divorced advocate community. That's why we have our group calls. That's why guys network all across the country here, and actually even across the world. We have guys that do connect across the world, and because I remember myself thinking, am I crazy for wanting to have a specific idea around what is right for my daughters, and you're just not getting that positive reinforcement and feedback. And even if you have good friends that don't know, it's like they don't understand, they don't know what this high conflict is, because it's such a small minority of people that go through it and deal with it. And I love your point about, you need two parents. Two parents bring two different things to child rearing and bringing kids up that the other ones don't. And I learned this more probably after the fact, trying to be dad and mom all the time. And it's almost virtually impossible. You need both parents. And I say that to say, Ajdin, is that I think it's a red flag. And I think this is a fair red flag for the dads listening, that if your soon-to-be ex is not encouraging that, or is finding fabricated, outside of any, if there's physical abuse, like, any kind of abuse going on, obviously that's wrong. That shouldn't happen. But outside of anything like that, if she's finding reasons or trying to undermine your relationship, that is a huge red flags, Dad, and you've got to pay attention to that. And so I guess I want to ask you, Ajdin, about what was the shift that then finally made you go from trying to convince her, right? Because and realizing that begging for permission was just a dead end. You weren't going to change her mind, to preparing to win in court.
Well, I think the main shift was more emotional than rational. And it was, I think, so before court, we went into this kind of like Yeah, I'm not sure if in the US where you are there is such a role, but in Holland there is a role which is kind of like a child advocate, and you could go into a program with this person, and her role is basically to represent the child. When the child is very
Yes.
young, they cannot express their voice, so this person expresses. So we went into this trajectory with her, and I was quite happy with that. I agreed pretty much with everything that she said. She basically stated, both parents are needed, and we need to work towards that situation. Now, she also understood that the mother had difficulty in letting go of that control and that need to kind of, overly protect and keep our son constantly with her. And I understood that. I said, okay, if these are, I mean, I don't agree. I didn't agree with it even back then. I thought like we were all grown ups. You should be able to kind of, let it go. But, respect, let's build up towards. And at a certain point, like you mentioned in your introduction, we started with alone time. So I was able to visit him at her house a couple of times a week for a few hours, which was not easy. But I was happy to do that just to be able to see him. And then we started introducing alone time. First 15 minutes, then 30 minutes, and 45 minutes was a step too far for her. Now I'm getting to the point to answering your question soon. It's a little bit of a long lead up. But at a certain point, the child advocate said something like, look, if you guys, and it was always in the plural, it was never like, hey, the mother is not cooperating.
Yeah.
But it was always in the if, and she said like, if you guys are not going to follow my advice, I have to stop this program and write a report and forward you to court. Because she was not willing to give me 45 minutes. I had no idea back then why. The best I could make of is maybe she got scared that, after this 45 minutes, that would be it. Or actually, as I described in my book, I think she was back then hoping for some reconciliation. And at that point, she found out that wasn't going to happen. That aside. So anyways, getting to the point to answer your question, after that happened, we broke off with the child advocate and we were basically going to court. Now we're waiting for that final report. I was still going there to her place to visit my son. So at the first visit after that program with the child advocate was stopped, I said to her, look, I hope we can at least keep the 30 minutes of alone time so I can take him outside on my own. And to that, she said, yes, you can be alone with him in the bathroom while you give him a bath and change his diaper. And that, and somehow, I mean, it's not the first insult or humiliation I felt. I mean, it's not like it's a big deal that she said that. But that, in answering your question, what was the turning point? That was the turning point for me. And it wasn't a rational one, like I said, it was an emotional one. Somehow that hit me. And it almost like hit me in a way that it kind of woke me up. Right. It woke me up. What's going on here? I mean, it's
and that's what I wanted to get at is I think we all I call the amicable facade that we want to have, that this is going to work, particularly because, like I said at the beginning, typically we were the yes men. We're trying to make things better. We're trying to solve, naturally as men, we're trying to solve the problems all of the time, et cetera. But there's usually a time where it strikes us that, oh, this isn't going to happen. And what I want, and what I wanted to hear your story, because I had the same thing, but I want the dads to know that if she is not encouraging a relationship with you from the start, that is a red flag. Don't wait to have like this restricted time. Don't wait to have that realization happen. The next thing I want to talk about is the false allegations that they start making. Don't wait till that silver bullet comes where they're making the false allegation, getting a restraining order, kicking you out of your house, doing all of that stuff, because if they have not been encouraging it from the start, there's a high probability that they are going to go completely down this route, Dad. So even the dads that are listening are like, well, we're not to that yet. We're still amicable. Just be aware of, if she is not encouraging the relationship together, you need to be paying attention and preparing, like we said, because if you're unprepared, then you're going to be hit with some of what well, let's talk about next, because I talk about in the show here the silver bullets and how high conflict exes will weaponize the false allegations, and what they're doing is they're hijacking the court's the risk management engine, right? So their courts work on efficiency and risk management, and so what happened to you before your first court appearance? Her legal team submitted a 75-page statement from her family labeling you as aggressive and dangerous, a narcissist, claiming you were going to run off to Bosnia with your son. So, how did you react to that experience when that first happened?
Look, that was, I think, perhaps after that moment that we started with, when I came home and she wasn't there. I think that was the biggest shock right after that, because reading basically somebody else's version of me in a situation like this, where I was up until that point basically trying, to be as positive as I could and understanding as I could. Well, actually, before describing how it made me feel, let me jump into this red flag that you keep mentioning. I think, I think for me, looking back onto our relationship, etc., the biggest red flag that I should have paid attention to is, and with her that was rather new. I never had that with other people, regardless whether any kind of relationship, whether it's romantic or any kind of relationship. But when two people fight, at a certain point, you kind of calm down and you feel bad. And you apologize, right? Now, as soon as one person apologizes, the natural reaction in the other person tends to be they apologize as well, and they say what they did wrong, or they could have done better, or they could have, handled differently. I never had that experience with her. So the way our reconciliations usually would go is that I would apologize and state what I could have done better, and that would be it. I mean, there usually wouldn't be any reciprocity from the other side, what she could have done better, etc. And I think that has kind of almost put a stamp on the whole co-parenting relationship as well. I mean, even to this day, when things are running as well, I wouldn't say smooth, but as stable as possible, and quite stable as they are, that is still that stamp that kind of defines everything. If something goes wrong, it is never due to her actions or any of her responsibilities. It's either left in the air or it's my responsibility. And I think that for any listener would be kind of warning sign. If you have fights that go towards that kind of only one party accepting responsibility, you can kind of expect that to be the same in the future as well.
That goes to that high functioning yes man. If we're always the ones, and it could be described as codependency. If we're always the one that are people pleasing, trying to make things right, and there's no reciprocation around that, if there's no collaboration, there's no coming to the middle, like you said, most healthy, mentally, emotionally healthy people, when even if it takes one person or the other apologize, you want to come to the middle and you want to find common ground and you want to solve problems and make things better. And I think that's a great point. If you're in a relationship where you're the one that's capitulating all the time, usually means that's going to be the way it's expected during the divorce process. In the moment that you start to say the word no with a period and it's a full sentence, then that's when the amicable facade will go completely down and the mask will come off and you're going to see really what happens. So I think that's a great point. Only problem is I don't know about you, but I was completely oblivious to that, like hindsight, like you're saying. Well, looking back now, I think that's one of the ones. That's why I say the red flag of her not encouraging the relationship is really a good one, because it's outside of ourselves, right? It's outside, and it's focused on our kids. So, and we're focused on our kids as dads in this process. So if we're not tuned into our relational dynamic with our soon-to-be ex, at least you can be cognizant of something that's external from you, that is your kids, and that your kids are not being encouraged to have a relationship with you. And so that's an easy one for you to go, oh, okay, yeah, that's a really obvious thing that's going on here. I need to pay attention to this. I need to listen to what Ajdin and Jude are saying. Like, this is a big deal. Pay attention, because it's about to get much worse if she's not doing that. So let's talk about then also, did you have something else you wanted to add about that?
No. Maybe just to answer your question about about those 75 pages. I mean, somebody writing basically about your character that is, kind of almost like criminalizing your character. And I mean, again, looking back, of course, that would never be taken serious by a judge, because it's so unfounded and only written by family members. But at that point, I mean, it hit so hard.
Right.
But even then, I was scrambling emotionally, but I was still kind of, like in a tennis match, you take all your anger and your sadness and you convert it into focus, into, what you need to do. What I needed to do is talk to my lawyer about it. And I think my lawyer what parents in what I was going through, and what I would recommend all fathers that are going through something similar, get support, get help. And that doesn't mean just emotional support. That means also practical support. People who can explain to you what's going to happen, what needs to be done. And I had that in my lawyer. I had a fantastic relationship with her, and we were able to kind of like spar almost to the point of fighting. But she never let up, and she never gave up on me. And I always could go to her. And even when she recommended, for example, a parenting coach, or where she was the one recommended the child advocate, I mean, she always kind of explained things to the point that that brought me to conclusions about what I need to do. And even she said at a certain point that I was preparing half of her legal documentation, because by the fourth or fifth court case, I was so into it that I knew what was happening, and that helped in itself, because she didn't have time always for just my case. So me kind of checking up on her, oh, you forgot about this. Oh, there's also this angle. So we almost became kind of like a team, so it was no longer my ex versus me. It was almost like my ex versus a team of my lawyer.
Right.
Even though she had a lawyer, she changed lawyers, and it was never a good relationship, whereas my lawyer and I, we felt like a proper team. And that helped a lot, I think. And I'm not suggesting that everybody should have a lawyer, and in that sense, but get that from somebody. Get into a team with somebody who can help you. Like, if nothing, just give your opinions with a clear mind and the knowledge of all the legal aspects, etc.
Yeah, I love that. One of the ways that I describe to the dads in the community is that you're the coach of this legal team. So you really got to be on top of it. You got to be putting in the time and the effort to understand what the legal process is. Part of coaching when we do that individually is teaching them how to do that, how to communicate with their attorneys, how to, that team member, that attorney is going to be in a very important position player on your team. So they are important, but you are still the one that's driving the strategy, creating the playbook, doing all that with their feedback, because they're on the field, they're in the court system, they know that, they help you with that. But I love that. And I want to get into some of what you describe in the book as your strategy and how to do that. But first I want to talk about one of the more terrifying moments I found in the book, which is when her attorney submitted this 3-minute video filmed by her mom, and I want to bring this up because it shows the extent to which some individuals will go to create this false narrative in court because they are mentally and emotionally screwed up, right? So this is going to next level, right? And what she did is she made a video with your 2-year-old son, asking him, where did daddy hit you? Tell mommy where daddy hurt you, until your poor son pointed to his eye. Like, he was literally being coached. Now, you were able to fight this. You were able to go through the process with this, but still it is, or through the process of, taking this to somebody, to a therapist, and showing, and they were able to clearly determine that he was being coached. But I mean, this is sick. This is really sick. And the things that sick people will do if they're sick in the head are egregious. And so I just want dads to know that that's out there, especially the ones that are, again, in this amicable facade. It's better to be prepared and not have to use everything that you've got than to not, have all of your tools and then be needing them in this process. So just comment on like the level of just, it's really sick. I'm sorry, I can't say it any other way. The sickness that somebody would go to, or people would go to try to impact a child and take away your parental authority.
Look, I mean, I have two things I have to say about that. I mean, one is, even back then, I mean, I was stunned. Like I said earlier, I was at that point when I saw that, I literally was afraid they're going to take my son away from me.
Right.
But even then, soon after, I was able to kind of, twist it into something where I find the understanding for the situation. And the way I argued it to myself, wait a minute, it can't be this bad. I mean, maybe a toy had hit him while he was with me. And because he wasn't even talking back then, maybe he said something about that and she interpreted it differently. And then it kind of like snowballed into something else. Although I couldn't even remember that, a toy hitting him, right? So that's that doubt that I was mentioning, right? So this right. doubt. And then I thought to myself, but wait a minute. Let's say it was reversed, right? And let's say that, even if he had a blue eye, which wasn't the case, I would have called and asked, what's going on here? What happened? And that never happened. So to me, I can imagine people getting an idea about something or being afraid or being emotional. That's all understandable. What I find harder to accept is that people then kind of just let their emotions take over, let their imaginations take over, without actually just kind of checking, what happened here? Did something happen? She could have done that. But so that's one thing I wanted to say. The other thing is, let their
mental illness take over is what it is. I'm sorry.
I'm reluctant to call it mental illness. I mean, I definitely, the things that have happened seem rather abnormal to me.
Sorry.
Seem rather abnormal to me. But, emotions can take people. And I was also told by a friend who was a lawyer, not that kind of a lawyer in corporate mergers and in finances. He told me something that stuck with me. He said, look, Ajdin, people can do crazy things when they're advised, in a particular way. So maybe she just was emotional and she kept getting advice from a particular side that kind of took her away. If your loved ones and people who are close to you are advising you about something and kind of feeding your emotions towards one side, people can do a lot of things. But maybe I'm just being too positive as usual.
That's actually probably the root of the mental illness that has been carried on from family member to family member. But exactly, you do have you are giving a lot of benefit of the doubt, which I appreciate, which is really
what keeps me sane. That's one of the parts that I also want to give to your listeners is, the one thing that I've learned in this whole process is that just blame and it doesn't help, even when it's completely justified.
For sure,
blaming somebody does not help, and putting responsibility on other people does not help. People have their reasons for doing what they do. And I choose to focus on what I can do and taking my responsibilities and fighting for my son. And I've achieved that. And I'm as a person myself, regardless of my son, I'm as a person richer for it. And let alone him having a dad as fully as possible in this situation. So, I just want to give that. I guess that we are responsible for our actions, and it's perhaps best to just focus on that. Focus on what we can do rather than point fingers.
Yeah. Agreed. 100%. I want to, so with the rest of the time we've got, I want to talk about now, with that mindset, because that's a beautiful mindset, right? Then how you went about systematically overcoming these false allegations and then getting to the point where you're at now, where you've got a great relationship with him. You've got 50-50 parenting time, joint decision-making. So you have a background, business analysis and game theory. And so you tried years doing the nice thing with her in trying to send birthday messages, offering compromises. You're continually met with obstruction, and you realize that co-parenting was an illusion. So you described that you pivoted to a game theory strategy called tit for tat. And so explain to us how tit for tat works in a high conflict divorce.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey, dads, Jude here. I'm pausing this conversation for a mission critical warning. Everything we discuss on this podcast only works if you have a role to return to. Most fathers don't lose their kids in court. They lose ground quietly through drift and decisions made under pressure. Being unprepared is how great fathers become weekend visitors. I ensure your mistakes don't become your permanent reality. Stop the drift today at thedivorcedadvocate.com. Take the free weekend visitor risk assessment or book your fatherhood protection session. Your kids are counting on you. Now, back to the show.
Yeah, so let me first address how that came about.
Mhm.
It wasn't some kind of awakening or decision. It grew out of kind of, just as out of testing different things, right?
Mhm.
Not consciously testing different things, but in this vision that I had where, look, the best I can get out of this and the best for my son also, according to my conviction, is co-parenting. If I want to achieve that, how do I do that? So I always was busy with that question. So I tried various things. I tried things where I kind of, I don't know, sometimes I would let her have her way, right? Only to experience afterwards that didn't get reciprocated. Then I would do it differently, where I would just kind of like do my own thing without consulting with her. That would be severely punished and ruin the relationship. Then I tried just asking and consulting. That didn't work because as soon as I put her on the spot and asked for her opinion, immediately somehow it turned into a fight, right? So all these ways that I unconsciously tested, at a certain point, some things started to work. And I realized that what started to work and is almost like a kind tit for tat. And a tit for tat is simply like, getting back at people when they deserve it and being nice to them when they are nice. But the two things that I have to add about this classic tit for tat strategy, one is that it's not a nice form of tit for tat, but one with real care in the language, right? So it's not like, hey, if you do this, I'll get back at you, right? So that's going to immediately be perceived as a threat. So you can't do that. But it's more like, right? Also not in the case. So let's say I ask for a favor. Hey, my cousin has a birthday. Our son is with you next week. Can I take him to that birthday? The answer is usually no. I don't go and say, next time when she asks that, I don't go and say like, yeah, remember when you said no, so now I'm saying no? Because that too is then going to be a conflict situation, right? So the way you implement the tit for tat is in the least confrontational way possible, right? So that's the first thing. And the second thing is, and what I found the hardest in this strategy is turning back on the cooperation. Because after not once, twice, or three times, or even multiple times when she hasn't cooperated, when she finally does, I always had this feeling, yeah, but remember the 4 times that you didn't, right? So you don't deserve for me to cooperate this time. But that's also not tit for tat. Tit for tat needs to almost be like an emotional thing, like you're almost like dealing with like a strategic business partner. When they show cooperative behavior, you immediately switch back to cooperating. And just treating it like that has helped me in terms of this, because there's always resentment, right? For things that have happened, I carried and still carry the resentment towards her for those things. And it's that resentment that prevents cooperation pretty much. And that's and dealing it in such a way where I literally just at a certain point outlined this strategy and said, like, I'm going to behave like this, it becomes almost like a manual that I follow that allows me not to get emotionally attached. And through that process, this resentment has taken a back seat further and further away. Whether I'll ever be free of this resentment that I still carry, who knows? But I don't even care that much because it's quite far back nowadays.
Right.
It's so far back, the resentment towards her, that I could even maybe be cordial and social and truly in a cooperative situation. But the point to that now is that I don't think that that's the best way to deal with her, because one of the testing strategies was to just cooperate on everything and ask questions, and that has not worked. What does seem to work is that I say, like, hey, this is my opinion. If you can let me know by then and then what your opinion is. Now, usually that doesn't happen. One of the strategies that didn't work is that I would then remind her, hey, we're waiting on this. That never worked. It just creates more fighting. So now I rephrase my questions in, this is what I want to do. I'd like to hear your opinion by then and then. And then I add, if I don't get, this is what I'm going to do then and then. Now, I don't know if she forgets or if she actually likes that. I don't know, and I don't care. But oftentimes, no answer comes back, and then I just do what I communicate that I would do.
Right.
And often
I really love this part of your book, and I highly encourage the listeners, if you even just to buy it for this part of it, because I like the name. It's kind of funny and kind of catchy, and usually we think of tit for tat in a negative manner, but I took some notes about this because I wanted to be real clear of what you just described, but for also the listeners to understand, and like the mechanics that you're describing. And what you say in the book is start with fairness and generosity, right? If the other side cooperates, keep cooperating. And that's best case scenario, right there. If they obstruct or cross a boundary, pause and enforce the boundary immediately, which is really, really important, especially for guys like us who probably didn't have a lot of boundaries in the relationship, right? And then the moment they return to cooperation, forgive instantly. So then that's it. You set your boundary. You adhere to your boundary. They accept that and are respect that, and then you guys can go forward, and it's all good. The other part that you describe is stop overgiving. Again, another challenge with us guys, realizing that continuous unreciprocated goodwill doesn't build trust. And I love that part right there. I think is a huge, if you guys don't get any other message from today, realizing that continuous unreciprocated goodwill doesn't build trust. You're not actually building trust in her. You're not building, the trust in a relationship, in a co-parenting relationship, et cetera. That's just not happening. And that's an important thing that I think we conflate, especially because of how we're designed and how we show up, right? It just all it actually does, as you described, is it reinforces her dominance and invites further exploitation. So I think that is amazing. And then the last part of this whole tit for tat is the parallel parenting mindset, shifting from the illusion that it's going to be a co-parenting where you're cooperating and you're going to actually, you just described like shared decision making, right? To just strict operational boundaries. My house, my rules, your house, your rules, right? Like you can use that tit for tat with all of that. And I mean, that's terrific.
And I think that it's a great summary. And the only thing I can add is that in this strategy, and this is a true, so the reason I call it tit for tat is not because this generic cultural description of what we use as tit for tat, but purely in game theory, there is a strategy called tit for tat. Now, tit for tat works best, as tests have shown, because tit for tat can go wrong. If one person stops cooperating and the other one also doesn't, you basically get into this vicious cycle. So tit for tat, let's call it tit for tat plus in that sense, in a game theoretic approach, suggests also to every now and then throw in some giving just to break that cycle. But indeed, as you say, we have to be really careful of just giving and expecting the other party to, I don't know, somehow become more generous or to reciprocate or to become a better person or to become a more giving person, because that's the kind of giving out of some kind of an emotional need or an emotional hope that it will change things, that it will change the interaction or perhaps even the relationship, whatever that relationship may be. And I think that's a recipe for disaster, that kind of giving. And I think that's what you just described so well. What I can add to that is that occasionally do still give that little extra, but but view that not as in terms of like, this is me throwing my emotional gut out there, hoping somebody will kind of, feed off of it and we go into heaven together. No, it's purely operational, strategic. You're giving every now and then extra to break that vicious tit for tat cycle into a progressive and positive tit for tat cycle.
Yeah, I like that.
That's what I truly do now, and most of the time it doesn't work, to be honest. But every now and
yeah, exactly.
But that's okay. It reminds me, hey, stop giving.
That's good. No, we got a guy in our community, and I always tease him because he's always the one that's on the calls, and he hears one of us talking, he'll just be shaking his head, and I'm like, okay, like every time I do that, I'm like, he's on my shoulder going, nope, like the little angel and the devil, and I'm like, he's like, nope, that's just not going to be it. But your point is that, hey, like you're taking the emotion out of it, like you described, and you're not doing it to get something back. You're not doing it, and that's the codependent in us, which is we're doing something to get love or get something in return, and you're just doing this to test the system. And that's a complete different mindset. And usually you're going to get the same answer like you described. And then your answer is going to...
It's easier to handle it. It's easier to handle
exactly.
it.
Yeah, exactly. And then...
No expectations, right?
Exactly. And then you just know in the future when the request comes in, I just think we should stick to the parenting plan. Let's just leave it at that. Like, you don't have to get into it. Like, there's no emotions left with it. It's just what it is, which is what I want to get to now as we wrapped up, because in some of the final chapters of your book, you talk about your internal transformation and how you stopped evaluating everything through a moral lens of what's fair and what's justice. And then you move to what I mentioned in the beginning, which is your practiced calm, right? I love that phrase where you treat every hostile text or missed exchange or a court motion as a cold logistical problem, like we were just talking about, rather than an emotional battle. And so how does a dad build that mental muscle, especially right now where they're in the thick of it, when his world's on fire?
I think one thing is I never respond immediately anymore. So I'm talking just practical tips here. I think that's what you're asking for. I think.
How do you get to that practice calm? Because you're exactly right. The name is perfect because you have to practice it in order to get to it.
Yeah, it's following simple rules. So like, for example, I no longer have notifications to receiving messages from her. That already puts a little bit of the stress and the urgency, because usually when we get an email, get a response, and if it's something important, I guess the dad in you wakes up and wants to kind of solve it immediately, right?
Yeah.
So no notifications anymore. When I see the message, I see it, and I have a rule with myself: no immediate answers. I chew on it, and then I carefully construct the answer on how to respond from this operational strategic point of view. It's almost like when you're asking for a raise, right? When you're asking for a raise, your boss or whatever, you're going to be real careful how you, not only when you send the email, but also how you approach it, etc. What your plan B is, whether you communicate if you have a plan B. So, for example, to build on your example, when the request comes in, I even go to the point where I think about, okay, I'm going to accept this request. Do I ask for something in return immediately or afterwards? I've tested that as well. Immediately asking for something in return doesn't work. So it's best to just accept. But then at a good point, not too late, like you still want this request to be in her memory, but a couple of days later, when you want something, you ask for it immediately. And don't also not make sure to, when you communicate, not say like, hey, you wanted this, so now I want this, right? You kind of want it to be a very subtle connection. You almost want to phrase it as if there's no connection between those two requests, her and now yours, or mine in this case, but sending it at a certain point and in a certain way that they do see that there isn't, right? So it's very much about communication. So it's like de-stressing the urgency of the communication, and when communicating, being very tactical about it. That seems to have worked. And it's, to be honest, I'm saying now things that it's almost like it's a bit sad, right? Because I think conversations with people should be spontaneous, should be open and honest. But my experience has been different. But my experience has been different. This has to be handled like a job. That has been my experience. And that's how I'm handling it now. And the funny thing is, the better I get at this, the more the response is as if something is going so well. So all of a sudden I see positive messages, I see emojis, and it's so nice and positive from her that I sometimes almost feel like I should get into that way of communicating again. Then I remind myself, no, wait a minute. Right, this is happening because I'm sticking to this tactical operational.
Exactly, which I think is a great way to wrap up, because what you just described is amazing, right? You've completely transformed your mindset, and in turn, you've transformed what has happened. Like, through 12 court cases, 75 pages of false allegations, zero legal rights in a country that was literally ready to erase you as a father. You walked out now with 50-50 parenting time, joint decision making, and a thriving relationship with your son. But you didn't do it by winging it. You didn't do it just through sheer willpower. You did it by executing a strategy. Part of that strategy is mastering your nervous system. A part of that was building a forensic record that the system couldn't ignore to mitigate those false allegations. So it's incredibly important for the dads that are listening that you need to do that. So when you're in the thick of it, like you described, is you need the team. You need to, you need to be with other dads. You need to put your team together. You need people to help you, support you in this. And you cannot just let these temporary compromises, like it would have been easy for you to just be, trying to accept a little bit, the half hour, right? Which is crazy. But instead you decided to fight. So, I just want to encourage the dads to look for those resources, get out. That's why we've created the community here at the Divorced Advocate. Grab those resources wherever you can grab them, where you can find them. Hopefully, like Ajdin, you were blessed to find a great attorney, because not all attorneys are created equal. I mean, that's a phenomenal thing. We have a system through which we take dads here in the community on how to find a good attorney. But get the resources. Go to the website at divorcedadvocate.com, and then pick up the book, because it's just awesome. The book's called Fighting to be Father, a memoir of love, justice, and legacy. And like I said, if you just pick it up for the tit for tat strategy, I think that's terrific. But read all of it, because especially in the beginning, when you're talking about your descriptions of what you were going through as your son they were trying to take him away, was really gripping. And then, the outcome, and listening to you today, and how you just, I can feel your peace and where you're at now compared to what I read in the beginning of the book. And so it's just a credit to you. And then where can the dads listening pick up the book? Is it on Amazon or bookstores? How can they get a hold of it?
It's on Amazon. I only have it on Amazon. I don't really have a whole business about it. It's more like a personal thing that I felt I needed to write. Yeah, and the reason is, I don't know. Well, actually, the reason is mostly because what I felt, what I had gone through, was so almost alien-like, and the lessons that I've learned, that I thought like this. I literally thought like this must be shared. And then now I just feel like, I need maybe a little bit, make it a little bit of an effort that actually somebody reads it. Yeah. When I started writing it, I realized it's also, mostly for my son. I mean, I don't want him reading it until he's completely mature and emotionally stable, of course. But I tried also for him to be very fair in what I described, very factual and very fair. But mostly I want to give the message. Look, if I can just close with giving a message to your listeners, that would be the title of my book. Just fight for your kids. Fight not only for your kids, but fight to be father. Because, look, I mean, before I became a father, I knew of cases, whether it's in friends or family circles of fathers who were not present for their kids. And I never could understand why that was. I always kind of thought like there must be something wrong with him. Now I know very differently how, how things usually go. But I just want to say, look, it's fight not only for your kids, but fight for yourself, because I cannot imagine somebody being a better person when they have chosen the path to not be present in their children's lives. Now, I don't want to discriminate. Surely there are situations when that was the best choice as well. But if you can, if there's any means for you to fight for the presence in your children's lives, not only will they be much better for it, but you as a person will grow. At least that has been my experience. I as a person have grown tremendously from being a father and from fighting to be present in my son's life. And by no means am I perfect, but like my son always says, what are you smiling about now? And I have to explain to him, I'm laughing at him. I'm literally just smiling because I'm enjoying the moment. And I just have like a reflective moment where I think to myself, like, my God, I'm just glad and happy and thankful to just be in this moment that I can actually teach you this lesson, and then we can go through this together.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. The book, again, Dads, is Fighting to be Father, a memoir of love, justice, and legacy. Ajdin, thank you so much for writing the book, sharing this with everybody, coming on today and sharing all of your pearls of wisdoms. And dads, if you found some value in this today, please share it far and wide on social media. Give us a star rating, comment. That all helps us to spread this information far and wide all across the world. Thanks so much for listening this week, and God bless.
This concludes today's briefing. Remember, in the family court system, intelligence without execution is liability. Ground is lost quietly during the decision gap between your court hearings. Being unprepared is how great fathers become weekend visitors. I ensure your mistakes don't become your permanent reality. Secure your role today at thedivorcedadvocate.com. Take the weekend visitor risk assessment to identify your exposure, or book your private fatherhood protection system. Stay strong. Your kids are counting on you.